Bonjour and welcome to my video. This video today is going to explore something that a lot of people tend to ask me about, and that subject is cravings. Now, what is a craving, first of all? I think it's probably worth defining what a craving is before we get going on why and where they come about. So, what is a craving? It's an urge to satisfy a need. Now, for most people, cravings come about because they feel unhappy, because they feel sad, because they need comfort, because they need some excitement, because they need some energy, because they're feeling tired. Cravings come around for a whole load of reasons. And what sort of things do we normally crave? So as humans, we normally crave things like sweet foods, or we normally crave things like savoury foods, and for some people we crave cigarettes, or we crave alcohol, and all these things. But the idea behind why we crave these things is to satisfy a need. It changes our state. It changes how we feel about ourselves. Which kind of gives us a clue on how to start combating cravings. No? But let's start about kind of why the cravings exist and why they come about. So let's start from the most simple model first of all, is that most clients tend to come in on their consultation and they will be complaining about low afternoon slumps, and that's normally when the cravings for chocolate and things come up. So that's purely a blood sugar thing. Okay, so just think about your blood sugar levels during the day. Is that normally when most people come in, it's like a bit of an arc. It goes up and down, a bit like a roller coaster. When you've got loads of sugar, you feel great, and when you've got no sugar, you feel tired, you feel lethargic and sluggish and all those sorts of things. So of course, when we're at this bottom of the peak, is that we want to feel better. We want to feel back like how we felt back up there again. So the quickest way for us biologically to feel that way is to suddenly supplement with a source of food or drink that's going to put us back into that state where we feel good again. That's what cravings are about. So what do we do in those first 28 days when most people start? Is that we try and get your blood sugar stable. So we introduce things like protein, we introduce things like carbohydrates in the right amounts, and we tend to introduce this idea of meal regularity just to try and get those blood sugar levels nice and stable. Because if you've got stable blood sugar, you're not going to have these highs and lows, which are going to get you to that place where you're craving and misbehaving, right? So this is the whole idea, is that blood sugar is normally the first bit. So if you're struggling from cravings, one of the quickest ways to actually stop that is by having a little look at how you're eating. And food diaries really do help with this, okay? Because you can start looking at your meals and seeing where and why you're going to have blood sugar spikes and lows. Now, blood sugar spikes and lows, what's going to cause them? Things that are normally going to cause blood sugar spikes: big meals. So having a giant meal and then having a big period afterwards where you're not eating, that's going to normally create a nice big high blood sugar level, then it's going to come back down again. Other things is that a high sugar meal or high carbohydrate meal is going to give you the nice big peak and then a nice big trough as well. So one quick way you can do is actually have a look at how your meal plan is actually organised at the moment and see, have you got any of that going on? Have you got any high carbohydrate meals going on, or you've got a period where suddenly you're not eating for a large period of time? Then again, that's where you're going to find your cravings are normally going to start coming out. So yes, first of all, blood sugar is probably the first area that I would look at when it comes to cravings. Now, probably the second area is something that most people don't really think about too much, and that will come down to gut health. Now, we've spoken about gut health a fair bit, whether it's in your consultation or you normally hear me rabbiting on about it a fair bit of the time. But the state of your gut flora, or the bacteria in your gut, is potentially going to change what you are craving. So if you've got a lot of bad bacteria, you can get conditions known as dysbiosis, which actually can lead to almost this look of a small bloated little belly. And I've suffered from this in the past myself, and it's not very pleasant. But if you've got dysbiosis, it essentially means that you've got more bad bacteria than you do good bacteria in the gut. So if you've got a lot of bad bacteria in the gut, those things actually thrive on sugars and glucose and all those sorts of things. So if you've got a lot of bad bacteria, those guys want to be fed. Feed me, feed me. So if these bad guys want to be fed, there's loads of research that basically tells us how your gut microbiome, or all of the bacteria in your gut, basically connects up to your head and tells your brain that you need more glucose to feed the bad guys in your gut. So it becomes this never-ending cycle. Because what you're doing is actually your brain is saying, you need sugar, hey, you need sugar, because these guys need feeding. So when it comes to improving this side of things when it comes to cravings is probably the first thing we want to look into is how can we actually improve the state of your gut. So of course we've used elements of this in the past, actually using a elimination diet and actually seeing if there's any food intolerances there and things like that can help, because it will allow your gut to actually thrive on the foods that actually agree with your body rather than not, which helps create that environment where good bacteria are going to grow and bad bacteria won't. But another way in which we can find that we can help just the gut bacteria along a little bit, in a simple way anyway, is just by introducing some probiotics. They're a simple supplement, there's nothing wrong with them, you can't really overdo them, but just getting a good high quality brand of probiotics would normally help just encourage a lot more good bacteria growth down there, which will of course mean that you are not having these relentless sugar cravings, as it were. Of course, fixing your gut health can be a hell of a lot more complicated than this. If there's things like leaky gut going on, or there's other elements that are actually affecting your gut health, then of course maybe that's something that we need to talk about on a more personal basis in terms of actually helping you move forwards and getting rid of cravings in that sense. Which kind of brings me on to my next point. And this area that I like to discuss when it comes to cravings is actually mindset, or your headspace. And I appreciate that a lot of people don't like talking about this mindset stuff because it's a little bit voodoo and it can make them appear a little bit vulnerable and a little bit weak if they talk about their feelings and emotions. But the thing that we have to remember here is that actually your body and your mind are completely connected, which means that the thoughts that you think often lead to the behaviours that you act out. And that's an important thing just to consider for a second, because when it comes to cravings, we said at the start of this video is that cravings very much normally come about from an emotional state. So if we feel upset or angry or stressed or tired, these are emotions. And if we're feeling these emotions, they often lead to the behaviours, which is a craving. Okay? So obviously one of the most simplest ways that you can tackle this whole idea of cravings is actually have a look into what is building these emotions in the first place, and look at how you can benefit in your life anyway, just from building different solutions, reframing situations, and actually being a stronger person by dealing with the emotional element, because the cravings will subside because you won't need as much comfort. So that's obviously the first part where the whole mind and body starts coming together when it comes into the cravings thing. But something else that I just like people to consider is that where are you when the craving actually comes? Most people, from when I've spoken to them, is the craving normally comes when they're worrying about the future or when they're dwelling on the past. Both areas, future and past, are going to cause some unrest in our mind, because either we're going to be worrying about what happens in the future, what happens next, what's going to happen if, or we're dwelling. And we are dwelling, and we're dwelling on things that we can't make a difference with anymore. We can't control, we can't change. But of course, both of these feelings, whether in the future or the past, are going to cause this mind unrest where you're going to feel like you need comfort. And that's why we tend to use food so much as a comfort, because we're either dwelling or we're worrying. So obviously one of the nicer ways of actually dealing with this whole idea of cravings, if it's just a learnt behaviour for dealing with how we're feeling, is that actually just trying to be more present. And there's loads of ways in which you can be more present. Some people like to meditate, some people like to practice mindfulness, some people like to journal, some people like to have coaching calls. Whatever it is, whatever makes you feel present. It could be walking in the forest, it could be walking outside, it could be taking that 30 minutes at lunchtime to have a break and just let your head relax a little bit. It could be listening to your favourite music. It could be any of these things. Anything that's going to change your headspace is going to help with cravings. The more relaxed you are and the less that you are actually dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, and the more presently that you're living, the more likely that the cravings are going to go away. So there's just 3 areas in which to consider today. Is that obviously we've got cravings is such a big topic and something that a lot of people actually struggle with. But for a lot of people is that if we had a little play with blood sugar, maybe had a look at gut health, and had a look at the mindset element, is that cravings do have the potential to go away. And you can be in control of cravings. So hopefully this video, I know it's slightly lengthy, has helped you in some way, but hopefully it's opened your eyes to just a couple of the different elements of why craving is so complicated, and hopefully given you a few ideas on how to actually crave less and actually feel better about yourself. That's Scott Marsh, the Mind Body Mentor, out for today, and again, hopefully this helped.